I'd like to sort of pivot a little bit. I want to say thank you to Sultan for being here with us tonight. And I'd just like to ask you to share with us, what would you say was one of the first things that sparked your interest in the environmental movement? As a youth advocate and public speaker, what was the one thing that you would say that caused you to get involved in environmental justice?
Thank you, and thank you to the organizers and those who invited me on this panel. I would have to say that, my interest in environmental justice began early in my life as an attendant of environmental science academies in my early education. But as I closed out my education at Western Michigan University, my thesis in writing was on urban agriculture, which I did my studies in Detroit, looking at food access and looking at what are known as food deserts, where a lot of communities don't have access to quality nutrition. And now being involved in education, working a lot with Black and Brown youth in those communities that oftentimes, when you're talking about justice, which as I understand it is fair dealing or fair treatment, that dealing with younger populations, the first step with me always is educating them into an awareness of the way that the environment affects them, and understanding that there's a connection with all of their surroundings, that if they are not enlightened to, they go through the motions. They don't quite understand the implications of their surroundings and what can be done to make sure that the environmental influences around them are most suitable. So working with younger populations, for me, my job is advocate. My whole job is advocacy, but raising younger populations into an awareness of their surroundings, first and foremost, to gain an interest is usually step one, but then teaching them how to use their voice in an intelligent manner as they grow up, to be able to be a force and power in their communities, to be able to know how they have a hand in their environment, not only in hands-on grassroots work, but being able to address city, state organizations, and be able to address government, working with young people, especially in Grand Rapids Public Schools. It all begins with educating, enlightening, so that they at least first have the idea sparked, and then from there, the possibilities are limitless.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like to just open this question up to the panel in general, and someone can kind of just jump right in. Just how would you say that your work has changed during the time of this pandemic? And do you believe that there are any new issues that have come about since COVID? Any new issues or struggles that you can share or?
Well, this is Lisa. Repeat the question again so I make sure that I'm answering in order.
Okay. Yes, just wondering if there are any new challenges that you're facing due to the COVID pandemic. How have things changed for your organization?
Um, so things have changed for my organization in terms of going from an in-person programming to virtual. Mary, you have done a phenomenal job in keeping us on course and making sure we get the information. This is such an important conference that happens annually, and I'm so glad that it continued regardless of the fact that we can't be in person. So our kitchen table, we get a really good feel and getting to know our families when we connect together and cook together or plant together. And so COVID has taken that away from us to a certain extent. We do, we were able to show families how to plant their own garden by practicing social distancing and yet still being able to be in the same space with families that we work with. As well as we ran a small base farmers market. That was another big change for us. Normally we have between 7 to 14 vendors. This year we were up to 25 vendors where folks wanted to be engaged around connecting with the community and supporting an organization that's ran by an African-American woman, and 95% of our vendors, as well as our families, are persons of color. But going virtual is scary because there are things that we're able to better understand when we connect face to face. And so we were very fortunate in that all of the families that we were working with, regardless, like me, how lack of technology is not our friend. We bumble our way through it. They jumped on Zoom calls and we were able to still do our consultation with our registered dietitian. We were still able to do our cooking demos and planning. And so that was new for us. We're still fumbling our way through, to be quite honest, making sure that our connections, our bonding with each other is still strong, but virtual brings about its challenges. So that was new for us. And then there was a part two. What was the part two? I'm sorry, Deidre. Deidre?
It pretty much was just, what are some of the challenges that you're facing during this COVID crisis? Were there any new challenges?
So going virtual would be our challenge, but really understanding intersectionality, we do, but there were some things that we had to bring into the fold that we really needed to figure out how do we offer it, since it is not our strength, or it is not a space that our kitchen table would normally be in. So for example, many of our families who are part of the GRPS system, Kentwood system, Wyoming system, what are they doing? They're doing virtual school, right? And yes, they're interested in growing their own food and participating in the cooking demos, but we couldn't ignore the fact that we have challenges around what can we do to help around tutoring. Seeing if we can put a group of professional or tutors together to help those families within the OKT programming. How do we help to meet that need, understanding it's not our space, but we see that our families are struggling with that space. And if there's some kind of way that we can provide that support or service, we had to make that happen. Mental health is not our space. Our space is food growing. But we had several families that were in crisis. And beyond referring them to those who are in that space that's dealing with that, we had to figure out how can we get a social worker or a psychologist to work with us on some level, because our families are saying, we are struggling, we need help. Yes, we want to grow our own food, but this is so damn overwhelming. We're challenged around transportation. I mean, so the COVID funds that came out allowed us to support spaces that we definitely would not have supported, but we can't just talk about food. We had to figure out how to stay in our space, but yet hear our families, and create some sort of avenues where we were doing something about it. We were taking some sort of action. So that's what our kitchen table has dealt with.
Thanks, Lisa. And it sounds like, you know, there is a lot of like uh, challenge to sort of where you guys have had to kind of step in and be almost like a one-stop shop to help everyone in the community, you know, in addition to what you're already doing.
We, again, we dealt with that face in person, and we made our referrals, or you know, you need to go to the King County Health Department for this, or you can go to call 211, and you can. We did that, but it's definitely more personal, up close, and in our face, that we had to come up with some additional strategies to make sure we were hearing our families and helping to figure out how do we integrate that into the work that we do. So in addition to our workshops around food and nutrition, we have a registered dietitian working with us. Our families wanted us to work with a dental hygienist to talk about dental care. So we've gotten a dental hygienist on board. Yes, the dental hygienist. Um, um, I don't know how to explain it, but like our dietitian, she's growing a food garden with us, and she's been growing for 2 years. Dietitians know food chemistry and how to talk about calories and all of this other kind of stuff. But through the growing experience, she's been able to help us talk about it more in a layman's term, from a um, a grower who is experiencing and learning along the way, if that makes any sense. I registered
Absolutely.
our dental hygienist is the same, but we brought together 4 or 5 tutors that are meeting with families to help them around subject matters that their kids are having challenges with. We started a bedtime story program where we are reading books with children. We started a arts program to help with the art experience that they're having. So there were things that we had to bring into the fold that we normally would not have if it had not been COVID. But we had to figure that out, because to go, oh, just call 211 wasn't enough.
Right.
It was not
So
enough. And
thank you so
we're
much,
been able to
Lisa.
meet that.
Yes, I'd like to open it up to any of the other panels that might want to address that question.
Well, you know, there have been challenges, but there it's also presented opportunities to grow the movement and to unite the neighbors in communities. Solidarity and I parted ways in January. My contract with them ended, and actually it ended in December, but the transition went on through the end of January. I got sick right after I left Solidarity, and I believe I'm actually a long hauler. Before the symptoms were examined, because some of my symptoms didn't fit the first uh, uh, descriptor or descriptors of the disease. But one of the things that Solidarity has done is they've created mutual aid projects, so that those that are in need can reach out, and uh, their needs can be supplied by the community. Our communities, Highland Park and Detroit, are already devastated. Unemployment in Detroit was hovering at 20.9% in 2019. It's actually closer to 33% in Detroit, and that's before the plague hit. So there are a lot of people that are going without, and right down in the grassroots on my block, in my community, out of my church. What we've been doing is providing food. My church had a project going where they were providing 825-pound boxes of food every week, at least one day a week. And fortunately had partnerships developed with companies like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and GFS, so that we had those food supplies more than one day a week. And it wasn't just canned goods, it wasn't just produce. I think yesterday they distributed food that consisted of meats, cheeses, and dairy products. So the entire gamut of the food pyramid is provided in my neighborhood, thankfully, because we're in an urban area. But I hear sirens all day long in my community because the number is skyrocketing. We are breaking records every day in Michigan. Today, there were over 7,000 new cases reported by the governor. And I'm not going to mention names, but you need to look at the maps and compare them to rallies that have been held in our state and look at how the numbers are growing exponentially. It is devastating.
Yes.
But we are, in my neighborhood, creating simple projects such as a young neighbor will adopt an older neighbor, and we're checking in on one another every day. We are creating texting chains or phone chains because a lot of people in urban areas, a lot of the underserved, a lot of people hovering or living in poverty don't have access to the internet. A lot of older people do not trust the internet. So consequently, they don't communicate like we're communicating now. They communicate by phone, and a lot of them don't even like texting. So don't even bother with that. But the human touch, even if it's 6 feet away, is still a very valuable commodity. A lot of us have adapted to using things like Zoom. It has been beneficial. The project that I just ended on Election Day was a texting project that reached out to over 345,000 residents that were registered to vote in Detroit and the metropolitan area. We did this in 6 weeks with 9 people that were actually texting. We also reached out using phones with the knowledge that a lot of people don't text. We also were granted extra funds about 5 weeks from the election. And within 4 weeks, we reached about 35,000 people door to door, safely distanced, just dropping off literature to educate voters, to encourage people to vote. Just vote. We don't care who you vote for, just vote. It's the beginning of the process because we need to change policy. We need to change policy so that nobody is left behind. When we get beyond this pandemic, we still have to be able to breathe.
Yes,
We're
absolutely.
not, I'm
I
sorry.
think that's so important. And just for the sake of time, I'd like to sort of pivot a little bit.